Good morning, everyone. Today we will talk about part 2 in the nervous system, the third and the fourth page, inshallah. In the last period, we talked about the parts of the brain, the parts of the system in general, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. I sent you a question to mention what are the two parts. For sure they are central and peripheral nervous system. What are the parts of the brain? Yes, they are the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Please concentrate on the functions like what I summarized here in the PowerPoint. This will be very useful for you. Today we will talk about the nerves and the neurons. We said that the peripheral nervous system is made of nerves. Actually, we have seen the last time also in the picture that exists in page 61 how the spinal cord receives sensory and motor nerves. It receives the information from the sensory nerves and sends the instructions through the motor nerves. Okay, so it receives like this. The impulses will come like this through the sensory, and they will leave through the motor. Look here. Here is the sensory. Here is the motor. But how the sensory receives the information? We will see that every nerve is made of neurons. These neurons, if they were sensory neurons, they will receive the sensation through our five senses. Let's say here through the receptors of touching. They receive the information from the environment about what you touch. If it was hot, for example, the temperature receptors will receive this sensation and will convert this sensation into impulses. What are impulses? Impulses are electrical messages. How these electrical messages are generated? They are generated by changes in the electric energy inside the neurons. Okay, this you will understand it later, because you will study about the ions, the sodium ions and the potassium ions, all of these ions that changes between them inside and outside. This what will make the electric message. Okay, the electrical message. Then this impulse will move through the neuron, coming to the spinal cord. Sometimes it will be translated inside the spinal cord directly, because there is no time to go to the brain if there was danger. Okay, then the action will be sent as an impulse directly through the motor neuron. If it was very, very hot, like something burning, this will happen. So the motor neurons will move the impulse through the motor neurons to your hand to move it out. If it was just warm and you realize that in your brain, so the spinal cord will receive this sensation through the sensory nerves, by the sensory neurons, Then the spinal cord will move it to the brain. The brain will interpret what is this feeling inside the cerebrum, as what we studied yesterday. Then it will send another impulse. This impulse will come to the spinal cord. Then it will move out of the spinal cord through motor neurons to your hand to move it out. Okay, like this. Okay, here is a nerve. Yesterday we said the spinal cord is made of bundle of nerves. Here is one nerve, as you see. One nerve is made of bundle of neurons. What are the neurons? Neurons are the nerve cells. These nerve cells that we use to draw as the star-shaped neurons. Star-shaped neurons. How many times I draw them for you? Here I draw one. This is one here also. Here how they are attached, the neurons. One beside one, one beside one, like this. Also there is another one here. Here, this, as I used to summarize the information in the class, as you know, this the concept mapping for this lesson. The peripheral nervous system is made of nerves. These nerves are made of neurons. The neurons are the nerve cells. Here is the nerve cell, as you see, that has the star shape. It is made of this, the cell body, that include inside it the nucleus. Then these extensions that are called dendrites, and this long tail-like structure that is called axon. Finally, the terminals, axon terminals. Okay, now before talking about how the impulse is moving through this cell or this neuron, let's talk about the types of neurons in general. This is very important. We mentioned that many times. These are sensory neurons and motor neurons. Sensory neurons are the neurons, as what we have seen when we talk about the spinal cord. Sensory neurons gather the information from and around the body, then convert them to impulses. Again, what is an impulse? It is the electrical message. The electrical message. We said from the beginning that the function of the nervous system to send and receive information as electric messages. What are these electric messages? They have a name. This name is impulse. Impulse is the electric message. Then they move impulses to the spinal cord and to the brain. This is the function of the sensory neurons. Okay, the other type of neurons are the motor neurons. As you see, motor neurons. These motor neurons, they move the instructions and the orders from the brain and the spinal cord as impulses. So here, instructions. The sensory gather the information, while the motor neurons move the instructions and the orders from the brain and the spinal cord as impulses also to the rest of the body. So here the sensory moves the sensation, moves the information from the environment, from all around the body. The motor neurons move the instructions and the orders. Okay, so these are the two types of neurons. Neurons make up the nerves, but they function or they work with the help of cells called glial cells. What is the function of these glial cells? Can they move impulses? Are they involved in the sensory and in the motor action and reaction? No, actually, they don't have any function with the impulses or with the function of the nervous system at all. What is their function? Just to protect and support the neurons. That's it. So they exist in a greater number, as what they wrote here in the book. They said your brain has about 100 billion neurons. Imagine 100 billion neurons. But there are about 10 to 50 times more glial cells in your brain. These cells are created only to protect the nerve cells. Protecting the nerve cells is very, very important function. Why? Because as what we mentioned in the last term when we studied the cell division, nerve cells are not able to be divided. So they don't have mitosis, there is no mitosis. So if any cell is damaged, it will not recover, it will not be replaced. So protecting the nerve cells is very, very important issue. And that's why, as you see here, where is our PowerPoint? Look how they are protected inside the nerve. How the spinal cord is protected inside the vertebrae, because the nerve cells are very, very important cells. If they are damaged, that means there is no recovery. لا سمح الله. Okay, now let's go to the here we talk about the sensory neurons, we talk about the motor neurons. We are done from this. Look at this. What is this? What is this path here? This path is for the sensory. Here is the path for the sensory. Then here is the path for the motor to move the hand out. That's it. So let's talk now about the structure of the neuron and how the impulse can move through the neuron. As what we said, the neuron is made of cell body, which include the nucleus and other organelles, the dendrites that are extensions, as what you see, then the axon, this long extension, then the axon terminals. Okay, how the impulse is moving inside the cell or inside the neuron? Actually, the dendrite will collect the electric messages from the receptors. If it was sensory, let's say this is a sensory neuron, it will collect, it will take the information from the receptors. Receptors are specific cells that will receive the sensation in our 5 senses. Okay? Then these receptors will convert the sensation into impulses. Then the impulses will be taken by the dendrites. Now here is the dendrites. These are many dendrites. Many dendrites. Every one dendrite can take the impulse from a cell, from a neuron. So many impulses can move from many cells through the dendrites to this cell. Finally, the impulse will move from the cell body to the axon, then to the axon terminal. طيب, from the axon terminal, what will happen to this impulse? This impulse will continue. It will continue moving from this axon, it continue moving from the axon terminal to the dendrite of a next cell. Okay, but between the axon terminal and the dendrite there is a gap, as you see here. This area here, as you can see, it looks empty. There is a gap. How the electric message can move? Actually, in this gap, look at here. This is the gap. It is shown here. This is an axon terminal, for example, and here is the dendrite of the other neuron. When there are at the end of the axon terminal, there are chemical substances, specific chemical substances. These specific chemical substances, when the impulse reach them, will be released. These chemical substances will be released directly through the gap to reach the next dendrite. Once the chemical substance reaches the dendrite, it will generate an electric message again. So through the neuron, the impulse moves as electric message. Between the axon terminal and the next dendrite, it moves as a chemical message, by this chemical substance. We call this chemical substance a neurotransmitter. Actually, there are different neurotransmitters inside our body. I think you hear about some of them, such as serotonin, such as endorphin, such as many. Now, this what come to my mind. These dopamine and others. These are neurotransmitters that can transmit the message between the axon terminal and the dendrite, the next dendrite. Like this, the impulse can move from a neuron to another. That's it. I think we are done for today. This is the very important information, how the impulse moves through the cell and from a neuron to another inside the cell or throughout the cell. It moves from the dendrite to the axon terminal. This direction is very important. From dendrite to the cell body, to the axon terminal. Then from the axon terminal to the next dendrite. Throughout the neuron, it moves as electric impulse. From axon terminal to next dendrite, it moves as neurotransmitter, which is a chemical message. That's it. This is everything for today. I hope that you can summarize for yourself all of this information, not to be accumulated later and not to be hard for you. Summarize them exactly like why I taught you before how to summarize. And thank you for listening. Goodbye.